Hey friends, in this video we're going to be discussing the 10 Commander Precon cards that just got previewed in the Legends Legacy Precon deck, which is a legendary tribal deck in Mardu colors. But before we jump into the cards, two quick reminders. First, if you want to find all Dominaria United preview cards as they're being previewed, you can head on over to mtgpreviews.com, where we have the full list of cards previewed and up to date at any given time. And secondly, if you want to pre-order the Dominaria United cards, you can head on over to our sponsor, cardkingdom.com/mtggoldfish, and be sure to ask for a scoop sticker in the order notes. Alright, let's jump into the cards, starting with the face commander, Dihada, Binder of Wills. Dihada is a planeswalker that can be your commander. It's a 4-mana Mardu commander that starts at 5 loyalty and has 3 loyalty abilities. Her +2 ability says up to 1 target legendary creature gains vigilance, lifelink, and indestructible into your next turn. Her -3 ability says reveal the top 4 cards of your library, put any number of legendary cards among them into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. Create a treasure token for each card put into the graveyard this way. So you can make up to 4 treasure tokens or essentially draw up to 4 legendary cards with this ability. Very powerful. And then finally, her -11 ability says gain control of all non-land permanents until end of turn. Untap them. They gain haste until end of turn. So just like a giant version of an insurrection, that is probably going to win you the game. Alright, so what are you going to do with Dihada? Well, she's definitely legendary tribal matters. And the first thing you can do is her +2 ability works very well with legendary creatures that really want help to get in there in combat. For example, Verrak, Bloodsky Sire is just a 2/3 with Death Touch, but has a powerful boast ability that lets you tutor a card from your library on top of your library. So Verrak is a ideal candidate to get indestructible until end of turn, plus the Death Touch makes it an excellent blocker if it has Vigilance. Same thing with Atali Primal Storm and Delina Wild Mage. These are all creatures that very much want to attack, but might need some assistance with Indestructible, with Vigilance, with Lifelink, which Dihada provides very well, and it's an excellent way to protect your Planeswalker as well. Secondly, we've got her -3 ability, which is a fantastic way to just generate card advantage. Not only are you getting legendary creatures, but you're also getting super friends, planeswalkers, or even legendary sorceries like Primeval's Glorious Rebirth, Urza's Ruinous Blast, and legendary artifacts like the Chain Veil, which can even double the amount of activations you're getting each turn with Dihada. And then finally, her -11 ability, a giant insurrection, is going to win you the game. You don't really need to build around it. It's just kind of nice to have, and if you're always +2ing, having a legendary creature that you're giving indestructible and protecting Dihada at the same time, you're going to get to it fairly quickly and reliably. Alright, moving on. We got the secondary commander in the Precon. This is something you can just swap out for Dihada at any given time, and it's a strong one as well. This is Shanid, Sleeper's Scourge, which is a 4-mana Mardu commander, 2/4 with Menace for a human knight, and it says other legendary creatures you control have Menace, and whenever you play a legendary land or cast a legendary spell, you draw a card and lose 1 life. So for 4 mana, you have an insane card advantage engine in your command zone, which works very well in a legendary tribal deck. So what do you do with Shanid? Well, it triggers off legendary lands, so you're going to want to run basically all of them, and there's a lot of good legendary lands like Taknuma, Abandoned Mire, which is great graveyard recursion, or you could just play as a land drop as well. And also it works very well with recasting your legendary spells, specifically like legendary creatures. Lisa, Forgotten Archangel, is a legendary creature, so she triggers Shanid by herself, but also when your creatures are dying, you can return them back to hand, recast them, draw even more cards with Shanid, and also the lifelink is very nice to offset the life loss that you're doing from Shanid as well. Garna is another way to just mass recur all the creatures that died this turn, so it's protection for your commander Shanid, but also protection for your other legendary creatures, and also draws you cards with Shanid as well. And other things you can do is you can, of course, combo off Cloudstone Curio plus Verrak, Son of Roga, which is a legendary creature that's 0 mana, and any other 0-drop that's not a artifact creature like Kobolds of Karakeep, lets you basically cast Verrak for free, draw a card with Shanid, then play Kobolds of Care Keep for 0 mana, bounce the Verrak back to hand with Cloudstone Curio, and rinse and repeat to draw an arbitrary amount of cards and lose an arbitrary amount of life. But at that point, once you're drawing like 20 or so cards with this combo, you're probably going to assemble some sort of game-winning combo before you would kill yourself. All right, moving on, we have some other legendary creatures in the deck that can be commanders, but not in the Precon itself. This is going to be a Boros commander, Cadric Soul Kindler. This is a 4-mana Boros legendary creature, dwarf wizard, 4/3, and it has 2 abilities. The legend rule doesn't apply to tokens you control, and it has a triggered ability that says whenever another non-token legendary permanent enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 1. If you do, create a token that's a copy of it. That token gains haste, sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So this is kind of like a double Panharmonicon-ish for legendary permanents entering the battlefield, specifically non-tokens. And this is going to be a crazy value engine that you can use a couple different ways. You double up on your legendary lands. They are non-token legendary permanents, of course. So you can double up on, for example, Flagstones of Trocaire, and then when you sacrifice it, you get to search your library for a plains card, put it onto the battlefield tapped. So it's going to be insane ramp in Cadric. You can also play cards like Inventor's Fair, which allow you to just immediately sacrifice a token and search your library for an artifact card. And of course, you can also double up on creatures with death triggers like Atsushi the Blazing Sky to make either treasure tokens or card advantage by exiling the top cards of your library and play them until your next turn. All right, moving on, we have a really cool one, probably my favorite of the bunch. This is Verrak Warped Sengir. This is a 3-mana Orzhov commander. It's a 2/2 legendary creature vampire with a couple abilities. First, it has flying, death touch, and lifelink. And second, it has this phenomenal triggered ability that says whenever you activate an ability that isn't a mana ability, if life was paid to activate it, you may pay that much life again. If you do copy that ability, you may choose new targets for the copy. So this is kind of like a a Rings of Brighthearth effect for whenever you're paying life to activate abilities. So what do you get to do with this? Well, the most powerful thing by far is doubling up on your fetch lands. So you can pay 1 life and crack a Marsh Flats, then pay an additional life with Verrak to double that trigger and get 2 plains or swamp cards onto the battlefield. So every single one of your Marsh Flats is basically like a 3 visits with Verrak on the battlefield, which is phenomenal value. And of course, you can do other things like other powerful permanents or abilities that have life loss associated to them. With Razaketh, you can pay 4 life to tutor up 2 cards, or Priest of the Fell Rites, you can pay 6 life to reanimate 2 creatures, which is phenomenal value. So Verrak is going to be very powerful, very sweet with fetch lands, obviously, but there's a lot of things you can do with him, and it's going to be really fun to brew around. All right, moving on, we have Bladewing Deathless Tyrant, the 3rd incarnation of Bladewing coming up. This is a 7-mana Rakdos commander, 7 mana, 5, 1 black, 1 red for a 6/6 legendary creature dragon skeleton that has flying and haste and a powerful triggered ability that says whenever it deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, for each creature card in your graveyard, create a 2/2 black zombie knight creature token with menace. So Bladewing is very expensive. 7 mana is no joke, even in Commander, but thankfully, you're in Rakdos colors, you're definitely going to have a lot of ways to cheat on that mana, either by using sneak attack abilities to cheat into play very quickly for just 1 mana, or even better, you just reanimate it. So what are you going to be doing with Bladewing? I think you're going to be doing basically 2 things. First, you want to fill your graveyard with a lot of creatures, so mass draw spells like Necrologia is one of my favorite ways of doing it, or mass mill spells to just get your graveyard as quickly as possible filled with creatures. Next thing you want to do is probably reanimate all those creatures. Cards like Balthor the Defiled are great ways to reanimate not just Bladewing, but basically all the creatures in your graveyard if you're a Rakdos deck. And also, these are going to be zombie knight creature tokens. So there's a lot of zombie lords out there to help pump up your 2/2 creatures that are going to be making with Bladewing. But I think even more interesting is Korvath Brightflame, which actually gives your knights flying, and haste, which is super fun with your zombie knight tokens. All right, moving on. This is a really cool one as well. Moira, Urborg Haunt. This is a 3-mana, 3/2 legendary creature spirit wizard with menace, and it says whenever Moira, Urborg Haunt deals combat damage to a player, return to the battlefield target creature card in your graveyard that was put there from the battlefield this turn. So it's a reanimation ability, but the creature needs to die before Moira's combat trigger resolves to reanimate it. So what do you get to do with Moira? I'm thinking basically a sacrifice deck. You want cards like Kakusho the Evening Star, which drains each opponent for 5 when it dies, or enter the battlefield triggers like Grey Merchant of Asphodel, which also drains when it enters the battlefield, and you want to pair that with sacrifice outlets like a Yara First of the Locthwain, which can sacrifice those creatures before you attack and trigger Moira's ability. So you play these creatures, you drain your opponents, you sacrifice them to your sack outlet, and then you immediately put them right back on the battlefield to do it again with Moira's triggered ability. It's super efficient and repeatable reanimation, so I feel like this is going to be a really nice powerhouse either as your commander or as part of the 99 of a sacrifice deck. And also, since this is a combat triggered ability, we have a lot of ways of getting extra value out of it. Cards like Fire Shrieker doubles our combat triggers, and also Strionic Resonator copies her triggered ability as well. And also, she's a spirit, so I actually really like her in a Name Death aspect. It's one of my pet commander decks. She is a spirit, so you could just dunk her into the graveyard, and then when stuff dies naturally, you can reanimate them with Moira as well. All right, moving on, we have a very specific, undervalued tribal leader. This is Zeriam Golden Wing. This is a 4-mana white 3/4 legendary creature griffin with flying that says whenever a griffin you control deals combat damage to a player, create a 2/2 white griffin creature token with flying. So Griffin Tribal has never really been a thing. They exist in Magic the Gathering, but they're pretty small tribe and underrepresented in general. Hopefully they get more support cards going forward, but this is a nice start to it. So what are you doing with it? You could go full-on Griffin Tribal. The only competition to the slot was Zuberi Golden Feather, which is a very ancient Griffin Tribal leader. Not very good, but if you want to go old school, you can rock Zuberi. Otherwise, you can rock Zeriam, and I think Zeriam's a lot stronger. Alternatively, you can just turn your creatures into griffins with stuff like Shields of Veilspear to turn all your creatures into changelings, which includes griffins. So you just swing with a mass amount of creatures, turn them all into griffins, and then Zeriam will double the amount of griffins on the battlefield by making a griffin token for each creature that dealt that was attacking or dealt combat damage. And you can double up on tokens, obviously, with cards like Anointed Procession. So it's sweet, not very powerful, but it is a cool ability. And hey, maybe we're going to see more griffins in the future. All right, moving on, we have the first colorless commander since the last time we visited Dominaria, actually, with Traxos. This is the Peregrine Dynamo. This is a 3-mana, 1/5 legendary artifact creature construct with haste that has an activated ability that says pay 1 and tap it, copy target activated or triggered ability you control from another legendary source that's not a commander. You may choose new targets for the copy. So this card can be your commander if you want to go hard mode, colorless tribal for the Peregrine Dynamo, and I think it's actually going to be pretty darn sweet there because artifacts in general are going to be what you're going to be filling your colorless decks with, just because most colorless things are artifacts, and usually artifacts have a lot of activated or triggered ability that are pretty sweet, and there's enough legendaries that you can just copy off them like a Lithium Engine, and you can get a lot of value out of it that way. But there are other spicy things you can do with it. If you don't have the Peregrine Dynamo as your commander, if you have it in the 99 of a blue deck or blue base deck, you can run a combo like the Peregrine Dynamo, Manamo, School at Water's Edge, and Chromatic Orrery. So the way this combo works, and it's kind of convoluted, is you tap the Chromatic Orrery for mana, you use one of that mana to activate the Manamo to untap the Orrery, and then you use another one of that mana with the Peregrine Dynamo to copy Manamo's ability to then untap the Dynamo itself. So this yields infinite mana, and you get to eventually just start drawing cards off the Orrery or casting spells with your infinite mana, and you probably win the game off that. So there's a lot of value in the Peregrine Dynamo. We're going to see how it shakes up. I think it's going to be a really sweet colorless commander, and it's also going to be pretty powerful in certain decks in the 99. All right, moving on, we got the Reaver Cleaver. This is a red legendary artifact equipment, 2 in a red for this equipment. And it says, equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has trample, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, create that many treasure tokens. So, hoo boy, this is going to be a fantastic treasure generator in red decks, and it's going to be fantastic in equipment decks as well. So what are you going to do with this legendary artifact? Well, there's a couple things you can do with it. First, like I said, you can put it in an equipment deck. There are going to be ways of equipping it for free with stuff like Pure Steel Paladin and Sigarda's, and there's plenty of equipment commanders out there to really take advantage of it. But I wanted to focus on the treasure token aspect of it, because that's going to be a little bit more spicy. That's a little bit more oddball. So you can run it, for example, in Magda Brazen Outlaw. You can generate more treasures with the Cleaver, and that will let you sacrifice those treasures to find dragon cards or artifact cards from your library, put them directly onto the battlefield, or you can use it in Galazeth Prismari, and you can start tapping those treasure tokens to cast instants or sorcery spells without actually sacrificing the tokens in the process. And if you're in a very dedicated treasure deck, something like Reckless Fireweaver is going to be really sweet, because every single treasure token you make, you're going to be pinging your opponents to death with the Reckless Fireweaver as well. All right, moving on, we have a super spicy legendary artifact here. This is Gerrard's Hourglass Pendant, aka the last piece of the legacy that has never been seen before in a card form. So this is a 1-mana legendary artifact with flash that says if a player would begin an extra turn, that player skips that turn instead, and it has an activate ability for and tap it and exile it to return to the battlefield tapped all artifact, creature, enchantment, and land cards in your graveyard that were put there from the battlefield this turn. So what I see from this card is basically a way to prevent opponents from taking extra turns. So if you have a Narset deck at your playgroup, this can shut this off pretty easily. And secondly, you can have this as a way to protect yourself from a board wipe. If somebody wipes your board, you can flash this in, pay 4 mana, activate it, and boom, all your stuff comes right back. Or you can mass sacrifice all your permanents for value and then immediately get them all back onto the battlefield as well. And that's all 10 of the brand new cards you can find in the Legends Legacy Commander Precon deck. I hope you enjoyed this content. Like and subscribe if you do enjoy this stuff. I'm going to be back soon covering the 10 brand new cards in the other Precon deck, which I believe is called Painbow. So until then, friends, see ya!